The child was dying. In the grand stone chamber of Darkspire Palace, beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed 1,000 winters, the Alpha King's only son lay motionless on silk sheets that seemed too white, too pure for the darkness gathering around his small body. 4 years old, with his father's black hair and his late mother's gentle features, Theric Darkspire was slipping away into shadows no amount of royal power could command back into light. The pack elders stood in a semicircle around the bed, their aged faces carved from grief and resignation. They had seen this before, this slow fading, this inevitable end. Their voices were low, respectful murmurs that filled the room like smoke. "The fever has taken root too deep, my king," Elder Morvayn said, his silver beard trembling. 3 days now without improvement. The physicians have done all they can. The boy will not see another dawn, Elder Cassian added, his words heavy as stones dropped into still water. We must prepare for the ritual of passing. Iskander Darkspire stood at the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the dying afternoon light. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, unbound in his grief, and his hands were clenched so tight that his knuckles had gone white. The beard that framed his strong jaw could not hide the tremor in his lips, the way his throat worked against words that would not come. He had lost his mate 4 years ago, watching her slip away even as their son took his first breath. Now the cruelest fate was demanding the boy too, demanding everything, leaving him with nothing but an empty throne and a kingdom that suddenly felt like a prison of stone and memory. "There must be something," Iskander said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute command. "Somewhere. Someone." The elders exchanged glances. They had exhausted every option, called upon every healer from every corner of the realm. The sickness was unknown, untreatable, a mystery that consumed the small body with relentless hunger. "My king," Elder Morvayn began gently, "we must face what cannot be changed." No. The word was granite, was iron, was the growl of a wolf who would tear the world apart before accepting defeat. Iskander turned from the window, and his eyes, dark as midnight, blazed with something beyond rage, beyond despair. "I will not bury my son. I will not." The door to the chamber opened so quietly that no one noticed at first. A figure slipped through, small and uncertain, moving like a ghost through the gathered bodies of power and authority. She wore the simple gray dress of a palace servant, her white hair bound in a braid that fell down her back like a rope of moonlight. Her skin was pale as winter snow, and her eyes, when they lifted to look at the dying child, were the color of stormy seas, gray and green, and full of depths no one had ever bothered to explore. Soraya Emberwick had served in the palace for 2 years, invisible as all servants were meant to be, her hands scrubbing floors and washing linens and tending fires. No one knew where she had come from. She had appeared one winter morning at the gates, half frozen and wholly silent, and the housekeeper had taken pity on her, given her work and a small room in the servants' quarters. She had never spoken to the king, had barely glimpsed him except in passing, a towering figure of strength and grief, who moved through the palace like a storm contained in human form. But she had seen the boy, little Theric, playing in the gardens when she hung laundry, laughing with a joy that made something in her chest ache with nameless longing. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. Now she stood at the edge of the gathered elders, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. They had not noticed her yet. They were too absorbed in their defeat, their acceptance of death. She looked at Theric, at his too still face, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest that was growing more labored with each breath. Something inside her twisted, pulled, demanded. A heat that was not quite heat, a light that was not quite light, began to build in her core, spreading through her veins like liquid starlight. She did not understand it, had never felt anything like it, but she knew, with a certainty that defied explanation, that she could help, that she had to help. Soraya stepped forward. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible, rough from disuse. "Let me try." Every head turned. The elders stared at her as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. Iskander's gaze locked onto her, and the intensity of it nearly drove her back a step. His eyes were predator's eyes, assessing, measuring, seeing everything. "Who are you?" he demanded. "No one, my king. Just a servant." Her hands were shaking, but she clasped them together, held his stare, even though it felt like standing in the path of an avalanche. "But I think I can help your son." "Preposterous," Elder Cassian snapped. "Guards, remove this girl. This is not a place for servants to interrupt with foolish—" "Wait!" Iskander's voice cut through the elder's words like a blade. He moved toward Soraya, each step measured, powerful, until he stood before her and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, he was overwhelming, all muscle and masculine strength, radiating an alpha's dominance that made her wolf, small and submissive as it was, want to bare her throat in instinctive surrender. But she held her ground. "You think you can help him?" Iskander asked, and beneath the suspicion in his voice, she heard something else. Hope. Desperate, fragile, dangerous hope. "I know I can try, my king." Her voice grew steadier. "I cannot explain how I know, but I feel it, here." She pressed a hand to her chest over her racing heart. "Please, let me try. If I fail, you have lost nothing you were not already losing." The silence stretched like a blade being drawn across stone. The elders shifted, disapproving, but none dared speak against their king. Iskander stared down at her, and she could see the war raging behind his eyes. Logic against instinct, resignation against hope. "Very well," he said finally, stepping aside. "Try." Soraya moved to the bedside on trembling legs. Up close, Theric looked even smaller, even more fragile. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his breathing rattled in his chest. The fever radiated from him in waves. She had no idea what she was doing. Slowly, carefully, Soraya placed her hands on the boy's chest, over his heart. The moment her palms made contact with his burning skin, something inside her cracked open like an egg, spilling light and warmth and power she had never known she possessed. Her eyes widened. The sensation was overwhelming, terrifying, exhilarating. It poured through her hands into the dying child. She could feel his sickness, dark and writhing like living shadow. And her power, her strange impossible gift, wrapped around it, squeezed, pulled, burned it away with relentless luminescence. Soraya gasped, her body beginning to tremble with the effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The room around her faded, became distant and unimportant. There was only the boy, only the battle being waged inside his small body, only her power fighting against the darkness that wanted to claim him. Behind her, she heard someone inhale sharply. "Her hands," Elder Morvain whispered. "They're glowing." Indeed, a soft silver light had begun to emanate from Soraya's palms, spreading across Theric's chest, suffusing his skin with gentle radiance. The light grew brighter, brighter, until the entire room was bathed in it, until every shadow had been driven back into the corners. Then, with a sound like a breath released after being held too long, the light faded. Soraya's hands fell away. She staggered back, her legs giving out, but before she could hit the floor, strong arms caught her. She looked up, dazed, into Iskander's face. He had moved with inhuman speed, and now he held her against his chest, one massive arm supporting her weight, as if she weighed nothing at all. "The boy," she managed to whisper. "Is he?" "Breathing," Iskander said, and his voice cracked on the word. He's breathing. It was true. On the bed, Theric's chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths. The grayish pallor was fading from his skin, replaced by healthy pink. Even as they watched, his eyes fluttered open, dark and clear and alive. "Papa?" the boy said, his voice small but strong. "I had a bad dream." The sound that came from Iskander was halfway between a laugh and a sob. He released Soraya, though gently, making sure she had her balance before moving to his son. He scooped the boy up, held him close, buried his face in Theric's hair. "You're all right," he said, over and over, a mantra, a prayer. "You're all right, my son. You're all right." The elders stood frozen in shock, their aged faces slack with disbelief. Soraya swayed on her feet, exhausted beyond measure, the strange power inside her settling back into dormancy, as if it had never been there at all. But it had been. It was. And everything was about to change. Theric pulled back from his father's embrace, his small hands on Iskander's bearded cheeks. Then his gaze shifted, found Soraya where she stood trembling and spent, and his face transformed with joy. "You," he said, pointing at her with a child's absolute certainty. "You made the bad go away. You have light inside you. I saw it in my dream." He wriggled out of his father's arms, and before anyone could stop him, ran to Soraya on unsteady legs. He wrapped his small arms around her waist, pressing his face against her stomach. "Thank you," he said, his voice muffled by the fabric of her dress. "Thank you for saving me." Soraya's hand came up automatically, settling on the boy's head, stroking his black hair. Tears she had not known were falling slipped down her cheeks. She looked up, met Iskander's eyes across the room, and something passed between them, wordless and profound. Gratitude, recognition, the first spark of something neither of them could yet name. "Guards," Iskander said, his voice steady now, commanding. "Escort this woman to the guest chambers. She is to be given every comfort, every courtesy. She is no longer a servant. She is under my direct protection." He crossed to them, and when Theric finally released Soraya, Iskander placed one large hand on her shoulder. The touch was gentle despite his strength, reverent despite his power. "You saved my son," he said, and his dark eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Whatever you need, whatever you want, it is yours. You have only to ask." Soraya shook her head slightly. "I want nothing, my king. Only to see him well." Nevertheless, his thumb brushed against her collarbone, a gesture so brief she might have imagined it, but it sent electricity racing across her skin. "You will stay in the palace as my honored guest. We will speak more tomorrow, when you have rested. But know this, Soraya Emberwick, you will never be invisible again." The way he said her name, as if he had already learned it, already claimed it, made her shiver. She bowed her head, unable to hold his gaze any longer, and allowed the guards to lead her from the chamber. But she felt his eyes on her back all the way to the door, burning like brands. That night, alone in a guest chamber more luxurious than anywhere she had ever slept, Soraya stood at the window and stared out at the moonlit gardens. Her hands still tingled with phantom warmth. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind raced, unable to settle. What had she done? What was she? And why did the memory of the Alpha King's hand on her shoulder, the heat of his gaze, the depth of his voice, keep echoing through her thoughts like a song she could not stop humming? She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. Everything had changed. She just did not know how much yet. The following weeks unfolded like pages in a book Soraya had never expected to read. She was no longer a servant, no longer invisible, and the adjustment was disorienting, dizzying, like being suddenly thrust into sunlight after years in shadow. Iskander had given her rooms in the family wing, not far from his own chambers and Theric's nursery. The suite was beautiful, furnished with dark woods and soft fabrics in shades of cream and silver. She had her own bathing chamber, her own wardrobe filled with dresses she had not asked for, but appeared nonetheless, in colors that complemented her white hair and pale skin. Deep reds like wine, soft grays like morning mist, midnight blues like the sky before dawn. The servants who had once been her peers now bowed to her in the halls. The nobles who would not have noticed her existence now watched her with curious, calculating eyes. The pack elders regarded her with suspicion thinly veiled as respect. The transition was jarring. Soraya would catch herself reaching for cleaning supplies that were no longer her responsibility, or starting to prepare her own bath before remembering that there were now attendants who would do such things. She felt like an imposter wearing someone else's life, waiting for the moment when they would realize their mistake and send her back to the servants' quarters. But the palace staff treated her with genuine warmth. The head housekeeper, Marta, a sturdy woman with kind eyes who had given Soraya her first position, came to visit her in her new chambers. "You deserve this, child," Marta said, patting Soraya's hand. "You saved our prince. You brought hope back to this palace. Do not let anyone make you feel you are unworthy of the king's favor." Still, the whispers followed her. In corridors, behind fans at formal dinners, in the training yards where the warriors gathered. Some were kind, speaking of her as a miracle worker, a blessing sent by the gods. Others were cruel, calling her an opportunist, a witch who had bewitched the king with unnatural powers. Soraya tried to ignore them, but the words cut deeper than she cared to admit. She had spent her life invisible, and now she was too visible, every movement scrutinized, every choice analyzed for hidden meaning. But Theric loved her with the uncomplicated wholeness of a child's heart. The boy sought her out constantly. He would escape his nursemaids and appear at her door, wanting her to read him stories or walk with him in the gardens, or simply sit beside him while he played with his wooden soldiers. There was a connection between them, something that had formed when her power flowed into him, something that made him reach for her hand whenever she was near. And Soraya, who had been alone for so long, found her heart opening to the child like a flower to the sun. She had not known she could feel this kind of tenderness, this fierce protectiveness. When Theric fell asleep against her shoulder during story time, his small body warm and trusting, something in her chest ached with bittersweet joy. Iskander noticed. She would catch him watching them from doorways, his dark eyes unreadable. At first, she thought he disapproved, that he resented his son's attachment to a woman who was nobody, who had been nothing. But as the days passed, she began to recognize something else in his gaze. Relief, gratitude, and beneath it, something warmer, more complex, more dangerous. The Alpha King was a force of nature in his kingdom. Soraya watched him in the training yards, sparring with his warriors, his massive body moving with lethal grace, his strength enough to take down 3 wolves at once. He fought with savage efficiency, and when he shifted into his wolf form, he was enormous, his black fur gleaming like obsidian, his eyes glowing amber with predatory intelligence. The pack feared him, respected him, would die for him without question. But with his son, Iskander was different, gentle in ways that seemed impossible for someone so powerful. He would carry Theric on his shoulders through the gardens, listening to the boy's endless questions with patient attention. He would kneel to Theric's height to speak with him, making himself smaller, less intimidating. And when Theric had nightmares, Iskander would sit by his bed through the dark hours, singing old lullabies in a voice surprisingly soft and melodic. Soraya saw all of this, and something in her chest tightened with emotions she could not name. One evening, 3 weeks after she had saved Theric, Iskander found her in the palace library. She had been curled in a chair by the fire, a book of ancient legends open in her lap, but she had not been reading. She had been staring into the flames, thinking about power and purpose and the strange path her life had taken. "May I join you?" His voice, deep as distant thunder, made her start. She looked up to find him standing a few feet away, his massive frame somehow both intimidating and careful, as if he were trying not to frighten her. His long black hair was tied back, revealing the strong lines of his face, and he wore simple clothes, a dark shirt and pants, without any of the formal regalia of kingship. He looked almost human, almost approachable. "Of course, my king," she said, starting to rise. "Stay." He gestured for her to remain seated, then settled into the chair across from her. The fire cast flickering shadows across his features, highlighting the sharp cut of his cheekbones, the fullness of his lips beneath his beard. "And when we are alone, you may call me Iskander. You saved my son's life. I think we are beyond such formalities." "I'm not sure I can," Soraya said honestly. "You are the Alpha King. I am extraordinary," he interrupted, and the word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "You are extraordinary, Soraya. Surely you must realize that." She shook her head, looking down at her hands. "I don't understand what I did. I don't understand what I am. Neither do the elders. Neither do the scholars I have consulted." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "There are old stories, legends of healers with gifts beyond the natural order, but they are just stories, until you." "Does it frighten you?" she asked quietly. "Not knowing?" "No." His answer was immediate, certain. "It awes me. You awe me." She looked up, surprised, and found him smiling slightly. It transformed his face, softened the hard edges, revealed the man beneath the king. Her breath caught. "My son adores you," Iskander continued. "He speaks of you constantly, asks for you when you are not there. He has not smiled so much since his mother died." Pain flickered across his face at the mention of his late mate, and Soraya felt an answering ache in her chest. "He is easy to love," she said softly. "Theric is bright and brave and kind. You have raised him well. I have tried." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "But a boy needs more than a father, especially one who rules a kingdom. He needs gentleness, warmth, things I am not always able to give him, buried as I am in duty and defense." "He knows you love him," Soraya said. "That is what matters most." "Does he?" Iskander's eyes met hers, and she saw vulnerability there, raw and real. "Sometimes I fear I have given him a father made of stone, a man who knows how to command armies but not how to comfort a child's nightmares. You bring something to his life that I cannot, and for that, I am more grateful than words can express." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the weight of confession settling between them. Soraya felt something shifting, the distance between servant and king, between stranger and companion, narrowing with each shared word. "Will you tell me about her?" Soraya asked gently. "Your mate, if it does not pain you too much." Iskander was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice distant, remembering. "Ilara was sunshine," he said. "Where I was shadow, she was light. She balanced me, challenged me, made me better than I was. She was the daughter of an allied alpha, and our mating was political at first. But we grew to love each other, truly and deeply." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She knew the birth would be dangerous. The healers warned her. But she wanted the child, wanted to give me an heir, wanted to leave something of herself in the world. She made me promise not to grieve forever, to live, to love again." His eyes, when they lifted to Soraya's, were bright with unshed tears. I have not honored that promise. Until you came, I had forgotten how. Soraya's throat tightened. Without thinking, she reached across the space between their chairs and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. His hand was enormous compared to hers, scarred and calloused from years of battle, but it trembled slightly beneath her touch. She sounds like she was remarkable, Soraya said, and she gave you a remarkable son. That is a legacy worth cherishing. Yes, Iskander agreed, and slowly, carefully, he turned his hand over beneath hers, his palm sliding against hers, his fingers curling gently around her smaller hand. Yes, it is. They sat like that, hands joined, the fire painting them in warm gold, and neither spoke. Words seemed unnecessary. The silence was enough, full of understanding and comfort, and something neither was ready to name, but both could feel growing between them, tender as new leaves, inevitable as spring. From that night, everything began to change in subtle, undeniable ways. Iskander sought her out more frequently. He would find her in the gardens and walk beside her, their conversations ranging from philosophy to poetry to the challenges of ruling a kingdom. He listened to her thoughts with genuine interest, valued her insights, laughed at her observations about palace life, and when he laughed, his whole face transformed, and Soraya found herself saying things just to hear that sound, deep and warm as honey. She learned things about him, that he loved music but could not sing well, though he tried for Theric's sake, that he read voraciously, histories and battle strategies but also epic poems and love stories, that he had a weakness for honey cakes from the palace kitchen, and would sneak them when he thought no one was watching, that he carried the weight of his kingdom like Atlas carried the sky, never complaining, never faltering, but sometimes she would see exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. In the council room, he began asking her opinion on matters of state. The elders bristled at first, scandalized that a woman with no title, no lineage, should speak on such affairs. But Iskander silenced them with a single look, and Soraya, drawing on knowledge she did not know she possessed, offered perspectives that were wise beyond her years, compassionate and pragmatic in equal measure. "Where did you learn these things?" Iskander asked her one afternoon, after she had proposed a solution to a border dispute that satisfied all parties. "I don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like there are things inside me, knowledge and power and memories that are not quite mine but are not quite separate either, as if I am remembering a life I never lived." "Perhaps you are," he said thoughtfully. "Perhaps you are something very old in a very young form." The idea should have frightened her. Instead, it felt true. With Theric, she was everything the boy needed. She told him stories of heroes and quests, played games that made him laugh until he could barely breathe, comforted him when nightmares woke him in the dark hours. And increasingly, Iskander would join them, sitting beside Soraya on Theric's bed, adding his own embellishments to her tales, his deep voice weaving through hers until their stories became shared creations. Those moments felt like family, like belonging, like home. Soraya tried not to think about what that meant, tried not to notice how her heart raced when Iskander entered a room, how her skin tingled when his hand brushed hers in passing, how she found herself watching him when he was unaware, memorizing the way he moved, the way he smiled, the way his eyes softened when they rested on his son, or on her. She was falling, and she knew it, and she did not know how to stop. The autumn equinox arrived, bringing with it the harvest festival. The palace and the surrounding pack lands erupted into celebration, 3 days of feasting and dancing and competitions. Soraya had never experienced anything like it. The joy was infectious, the sense of community overwhelming. On the second night, there was a formal ball in the great hall. Soraya wore a gown that had appeared in her wardrobe that morning, deep crimson silk that clung to her curves and flowed like water when she moved. Her white hair fell in soft waves down her back, woven through with tiny crystals that caught the light. She felt exposed, visible in a way that still made her uncomfortable. But when she descended the stairs into the hall and saw Iskander's face, saw the way his eyes widened and darkened, saw the way he stopped mid-conversation to stare at her, all her nervousness fell away. He crossed to her immediately, moving through the crowd with single-minded purpose. He wore formal attire, all black with silver embroidery, his long hair bound in a warrior's knot. He looked regal and dangerous, and devastatingly handsome. "You are breathtaking," he said when he reached her, his voice rough, intimate despite the crowd around them. "I cannot take my eyes from you." "You should not say such things, my king," Soraya said, but her cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Iskander," he corrected, "and I will say what is true." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the steel muscle beneath the fine fabric. He led her into the crowd, and people parted before them, bowing, watching. The whispers followed them like wind through grass. They danced. Iskander was surprisingly graceful for such a large man, guiding her through the steps with confident ease. His hand at her waist burned through the silk, anchoring her, claiming her. When the music slowed and he pulled her closer, she could feel the beat of his heart, smell the scent of him, pine and smoke and something uniquely male. "I need to tell you something," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Something I have been trying to deny for weeks now." Her heart hammered. "What is it?" "I feel—" He stopped, his jaw clenching, then tried again. "When you saved Theric, you saved more than his life. You saved mine. You brought light back into a darkness I had accepted as permanent. And now, when you are near, I feel alive in ways I had forgotten. When you are gone, I count the moments until I see you again. When you smile, the entire world becomes bearable. And when you touch my hand, even accidentally, it feels like coming home." Soraya's eyes widened. She could barely breathe. "Iskander," she whispered, "I am nobody. I have nothing. I do not even know what I am. You are everything," he said fiercely, "and I am terrified of what that means." The song ended. Around them, couples separated, bowed, moved to find refreshment. But Iskander and Soraya remained frozen in place, her hand in his arm around her waist, their eyes locked. "Come with me," he said suddenly, a command and a plea. "Please." He led her from the hall, through corridors lit with lanterns, out into the cool night air of the gardens. The sounds of celebration faded behind them. Above, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded corner, a small pavilion surrounded by night-blooming jasmine. The scent was intoxicating, sweet and heady. Iskander released her hand, and Soraya immediately mourned the loss. He paced a few steps away, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "I swore I would not feel this way again," he said, his voice strained. "After Ilara died, I buried that part of myself. I had to survive, to rule, to be the king my people needed. But you—" He turned back to face her, and his eyes were wild with emotion. "You make me want things I thought were dead. You make me feel things that terrify me, because I know how much it will destroy me if I lose you too." "You will not lose me," Soraya said, stepping toward him. "I am not going anywhere. You do not know that. None of us knows that. Death comes when it wants, takes who it wants. I cannot—" His voice broke. "I cannot love you and survive losing you." "Then do not love me," she said, even though the words felt like knives. "Keep your distance. Keep your heart safe. I will understand." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a sound that was half growl, half groan, he closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head back, and his eyes searched hers with desperate intensity. "I cannot," he said. "That is what I am trying to tell you. I cannot not love you. It is already too late." And then he kissed her. His lips were firm and warm, demanding and reverent all at once. Soraya gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair, the other wrapping around her waist to pull her flush against his body. She melted into him, her hands clutching at his shoulders, kissing him back with all the longing she had been trying to deny. It felt like inevitability, like destiny, like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Iskander rested his forehead against hers. "I am yours," he said, the words a vow. "If you will have me. I am yours, Soraya. My heart, my life, my soul. All of it. Yours." Tears slipped down her cheeks, warm and unstoppable. "I am yours too," she whispered. "I think I have been since the moment you caught me when I fell." He kissed her again, softer this time, tender and full of promise. Then he pulled her into his arms, held her close, and they stood beneath the stars, wrapped in each other and the scent of jasmine. While inside the palace, the celebration continued, oblivious to the miracle unfolding in the garden. They had found each other. Against all odds, across all distance, 2 broken souls had found their way to wholeness. The following months were the happiest Soraya had ever known. She and Iskander did not announce their relationship formally. Not yet, but it became obvious to anyone who watched. The way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him, the way they moved together, orbiting each other like binary stars. Theric was delighted. "Are you going to be my new mama?" he asked Soraya one morning, his dark eyes hopeful. Soraya had looked to Iskander, uncertain, but he had nodded, giving her permission to answer however she wished. "Would you like that?" she asked the boy gently. "Yes," Theric said immediately. "You make Papa happy, and you make me happy. So you should stay forever." "Then I will try my very hardest to stay forever," Soraya promised, and gathered the child into her arms. Iskander watched them, and the expression on his face was so full of love it made Soraya's chest ache. They fell into routines, the 3 of them. Morning walks through the garden before the day's duties began. Meals together in the private dining room, where Theric would tell them everything he had learned from his tutors, and Iskander would share amusing stories from council meetings. Evenings in the library, Soraya reading while Iskander worked on correspondence, and Theric played at their feet. It was domestic. It was peaceful. It was everything Soraya had never known she wanted. But happiness, Soraya was learning, was fragile. It came during the first snowfall of winter. She was in the library with Theric, teaching him to read, when a servant burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. "My lady," the woman gasped. "The king requests your presence in the throne room immediately. There are visitors, from a distant land." Something cold slithered down Soraya's spine. She rose, told Theric to stay with his nursemaid, and made her way to the throne room. The doors were open, and inside, Iskander sat on his throne, his posture rigid with tension. The elders flanked him, their faces troubled. And standing in the center of the hall were 3 figures in robes the color of midnight, embroidered with silver runes that seemed to shimmer and shift in the light. The one in front, clearly the leader, was tall and thin, with a face like carved marble and eyes that glowed with unnatural amber light. His hair was white as Soraya's, but his was the white of age, of power that had burned too long. He smiled when Soraya entered, and the smile was cold, calculating. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth as silk and just as dangerous. "The lost daughter of the Lumini. We have been searching for you for a very long time." Soraya stopped, fear flooding her veins. I do not know what you mean. Do you not? The man tilted his head. Tell me, child, did you truly believe that power was yours by chance? That you stumbled into healing gifts with no source, no origin? He laughed softly. You are Lumini, one of the ancient order of Lightbringers. Your mother was one of us before she fled, before she hid you away. And now that you have revealed yourself, used your power, we have come to bring you home. I am home, Soraya said, forcing steel into her voice even as her mind reeled. I belong here. You belong with your people, the man corrected, with those who can teach you to control your gifts, to reach your full potential. You are wasted here, playing nursemaid to a wolf child and paramour to a beast. Iskander rose from his throne, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. His eyes had gone completely black, and a growl rumbled from his chest, low and lethal. You will watch your tongue, mage, he said, and every word was edged with violence, or I will remove it from your mouth. The mage was unperturbed. I meant no disrespect, Alpha King. I merely state facts. The girl belongs to the Lumini Order. She must return with us to the sanctum. It is not negotiable. Everything is negotiable, Iskander said, descending from the throne, moving with the predatory grace of a wolf preparing to strike. And you will not take her. You would go to war over a woman? The mage seemed amused. Over a servant you elevated out of pity. I would burn the world for her, Iskander said simply. Choose your next words carefully, mage. They may be your last. Soraya's heart raced. She looked between the two men, saw the powder keg about to explode, and stepped forward. Wait, she said. Please, let us speak calmly. There must be a way to resolve this without violence. The mage turned his unsettling gaze to her. There is, daughter. Come with us willingly. Do not force us to take more drastic measures. You will not touch her, Iskander snarled, and the shift rippled through him, wolf rising to the surface, barely contained beneath human skin. My king. Soraya moved to his side, placed her hand on his arm. Beneath her touch, she felt the tremor of contained fury, the razor edge of control. Let me speak with them. Alone. No. The word was absolute. Please. She looked up into his dark eyes, willed him to see the plea in hers. Trust me. I will be safe. But I need to understand what they want. What I am. Iskander stared at her for a long moment, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Then slowly he nodded. You have 10 minutes. If you are not back in the hall by then, I am coming in, and consequences be damned. Thank you. She squeezed his arm, then turned to the mage. There is a council chamber adjoining this room. We may speak there. The mage inclined his head. As you wish. They moved to the smaller room, and Soraya closed the door behind them, though she did not doubt Iskander was right outside, listening to every word. What do you want? She asked bluntly. I told you. You. Return to us. Trained. Fulfilled. The mage studied her with eyes that saw too much. You are powerful, girl. More powerful than you know. When you healed the boy, we felt it across the world, a beacon of light that nearly blinded us with its intensity. You are untrained, raw, dangerous to yourself and others. You need guidance. And if I refuse, then we will take you by force. His smile was thin. And your Wolf King, strong as he is, cannot stand against the might of the Lumini Order. We have magic he cannot comprehend, weapons he cannot defend against. If he tries to keep you, we will destroy him and everything he loves, the child, the kingdom, every last soul who stands between us and you. Cold dread washed through Soraya. You would murder innocent people for one girl? We would retrieve stolen property, You belong to us by blood, by birthright. Your mother had no right to take you, to hide you. She paid for that crime with her life. Do not make the same mistake." "You killed my mother?" The words came out as a whisper. "The order did. I was not involved personally, you understand. But yes, she defied us. There are consequences for such defiance." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which made it more sinister. "I am trying to save lives, child. Come with us peacefully, and no blood need be shed. Stay here, and I promise you, your precious king will die screaming. His son will watch, and you will still end up with us, but carrying the weight of all those deaths." Rage, hot and bright, surged through Soraya. Her hands clenched, and for a moment, that power stirred inside her, wanting to lash out, to burn this cold, cruel man to ash. But she held it back. Barely. "I need time," she said through gritted teeth. "Time to think, to decide." "You have 3 days," the mage said. "After that, we will return with our full force. And I promise you, girl, you will not like our methods. We will level this palace stone by stone if we must." They returned to the throne room. Iskander was pacing like a caged wolf, and the moment he saw Soraya, he moved to her, pulled her against his side protectively. 3 days, the mage announced to the room. 3 days for the girl to make the right choice. After that, we will return with an army. I suggest you do not try to flee. We will find you. We always do." With that, the 3 robed figures swept from the hall, leaving silence and tension in their wake. The moment they were gone, Iskander turned Soraya to face him, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching hers frantically. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you? Threaten you?" "I am fine," she said, though she was trembling. "But Iskander, they say I have to go with them. That if I do not, they will destroy everything. You, Theric, the kingdom. They have magic, power beyond anything we have seen. They killed my mother." His face went hard as stone. "They will not touch you. I will protect you. You cannot fight magic with claws and teeth alone," Elder Morvayn said grimly. "The Luminae are ancient, powerful. If they have set their sights on the girl, this will not end well for any of us." "Then we prepare for war," Iskander said flatly. "Send word to our allies. Fortify the borders. Call in every warrior who owes us fealty. Empty the treasury if we must to hire mercenaries, battle mages, anyone who can help us." "For one girl?" Elder Cassian asked, incredulous. Iskander's eyes blazed with such fury that the elder took a step back. "For my mate," he corrected, and the word rang through the hall like a bell. "For the woman I love, for the mother of my son's heart. Yes, for her I will fight. For her I will die if I must. And anyone who questions that can leave my service now." No one moved. No one spoke. Soraya's eyes filled with tears. "Iskander, no, I cannot let you do this. I cannot let you sacrifice everything for me." He cupped her face in his large hands, gentle despite the fury radiating from him. "You are not a sacrifice. You are everything worth fighting for. Do you understand? I will not let them take you. I will not lose you. And I will not let you die for me," she said fiercely. "There has to be another way." "Then we find it," he said, "together. But you are not going with them. That is not negotiable." She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was not the Alpha King speaking. This was the man who loved her, who would tear the world apart before letting her go. So she nodded, pressed her forehead to his, and let him hold her. While around them, the pack elders began to make plans for war. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Warriors flooded into the palace from every corner of the kingdom, some on foot, some arriving in wolf form, streaming through the gates like a river of muscle and fangs. Weapons were sharpened, armor repaired, strategies debated long into the night. The blacksmiths worked without rest, their forges glowing red through the darkness. The mood was tense, electric with the anticipation of violence. Iskander barely slept. Soraya would find him in the war room at all hours, bent over maps, conferring with his generals, his face drawn with exhaustion. When she brought him food, he would eat mechanically, barely tasting it. When she tried to convince him to rest, he would pull her into his lap, hold her for a few precious minutes, then send her away so she would not see his fear. Because he was afraid. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was watching. He was preparing for a war he might not win, against an enemy he did not fully understand. Soraya tried to help, but mostly she felt like a ghost, drifting through the organized chaos, the cause of it all but powerless to stop it. She spent her evenings with Theric, holding the boy close, memorizing his laugh, his warmth, the complete trust in his dark eyes. "Are you going away?" Theric asked one night, his small hand in hers. "I hope not," Soraya said honestly. "But if I do, I need you to know something. I love you very much. You are brave and bright and wonderful, and no matter what happens, I will always carry you in my heart." "Papa won't let them take you," Theric said with a child's certainty. "He's the strongest alpha in the world. He'll keep you safe." "Yes," Soraya agreed. Because what else could she say? "Yes, he will." But at night, alone in her chambers, she would stand at the window and stare out at the gathering army, and fear would coil in her stomach like a living thing. She had seen what her power could do, but the Lumini had hundreds of mages, each one trained and experienced. What chance did wolves and warriors have against that kind of magic? On the third night, Iskander came to her chambers after the war council. He looked exhausted, his long hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw her, his face softened. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. She went to him, let him enfold her in his embrace. His heart beat steady and strong against her ear. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry I brought this to your door." "Hush." He kissed the top of her head. "You brought joy to my life. You brought light. You brought love. Whatever comes next, I do not regret a single moment. Even if it ends in war, in death, even then." He pulled back enough to look down at her, his dark eyes intense. "Soraya, I need you to understand something. Before you, I was surviving, going through motions, ruling because I had to, loving my son because he was mine, but feeling nothing else. I was a husk. You filled me again, made me whole. Whatever time we have, whether it is 3 days or 3 decades, it is worth any price. I love you," she said, the words breaking on a sob. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too," he said. "And tomorrow when they come, I will show them what it means to threaten what is mine." He lowered his head and kissed her, deep and desperate and full of longing. His hands moved over her body, learning her, claiming her, and she responded with equal fervor, pouring all her fear and love and need into the kiss. They made love that night, slowly, tenderly, as if they could memorize each other with touch alone. Iskander was gentle despite his strength, reverent despite his passion, and when he whispered her name like a prayer, Soraya felt her heart shatter and reform, bound to his irreversibly. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her white hair. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said quietly, "promise me you will take care of Theric. Promise me he will know he was loved." "Do not talk like that." Iskander's voice was rough. "You will be here to tell him yourself. Promise me." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I promise, but you will be here." We will both be here. This is not how our story ends." Soraya wanted to believe him, but as dawn broke gray and cold over the palace, she could not shake the feeling that everything was about to change. They came with the sunrise, an army of robed figures that appeared at the palace gates like shadows made solid. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all radiating that same unsettling power, that same amber glow in their eyes. The air around them shimmered with heat and magic, distorting reality itself. At their head was the mage who had visited before, and beside him, two others even more powerful, their presence pressing down on the assembled pack warriors like a physical weight. One was a woman with silver hair that floated around her as if underwater, her eyes burning white. The other was a man whose skin seemed to be made of living shadow, constantly shifting and reforming. Iskander stood at the gates, Soraya beside him, his hand gripping hers. Behind them, his army waited, thousands of wolves ready to shift, ready to fight, ready to die for their king. Archers lined the walls. Swordsmen stood in formation. But looking at the gathered lumini, Soraya felt her hope crumbling. "This is your last chance, Alpha," the lead mage called out. "Send the girl out, and we will leave in peace. Refuse, and we will take her by force over the bodies of everyone you love." "Then you will have to go through me," Iskander said, his voice carrying across the field. "And I promise you, mage, I will make you regret ever setting foot in my kingdom." The mage sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "So be it. You were warned. Your pride will be the death of your people." He raised his hand, and the air crackled with magic. Behind him, his followers did the same, and suddenly the sky darkened, storm clouds gathering unnaturally fast, lightning arcing between them. The ground began to tremble. "Soraya, get inside," Iskander ordered. "Get Theric and hide in the deepest part of the palace." "No." She gripped his hand tighter. "I will not hide while you fight for me." "Please." He turned to her, and his eyes were desperate, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "Please, if you love me, do this. I cannot fight knowing you are in danger. I need to know you and Theric are safe. I need to know that if I fall, you will live. Please." The plea in his voice broke her. She looked at his face, memorizing every line, every scar, the way his dark eyes reflected the gathering storm. "Come back to me," she said, her voice breaking. "Promise you will come back to me." "I promise," he said, and kissed her hard and fast, pouring everything he felt into that single moment of contact. "Now go. Run." She ran. Behind her the battle began. The sound was deafening, the clash of magic against fang and claw, the screams of the wounded, the snarls of wolves, the roar of spells that tore through flesh and stone alike. Soraya ran through the palace, found Theric with his nursemaid, and gathered the boy into her arms. "What's happening?" Theric asked, his eyes wide with fear. "Where's Papa?" "He is fighting to keep us safe," Soraya said, carrying him toward the inner chambers. "He is very brave, your Papa." "I want to help him," Theric said, tears streaming down his face. "You will help him by staying safe," Soraya said. "That is what he needs most." They reached the inner sanctum, a fortified room deep in the palace where the royal family took refuge during attacks. Soraya barred the door, set Theric down, and began to pace, listening to the sounds of battle echoing through the stone. Each scream, each explosion, felt like a knife in her heart. She could feel Iskander out there, could sense his presence through the bond forming between them. He was fighting with everything he had, but she could feel his pain, his exhaustion, his growing desperation. Minutes passed like hours. Then the door shook. Once. Twice. Magic crackled around the edges, eating through the wood and stone like acid. Soraya's blood turned to ice. They had gotten through. They were coming for her. "Stay behind me," she told Theric, pushing the boy into the corner. The door exploded inward, splinters flying like shrapnel. Through the smoke stepped the lead mage, his robe singed, blood on his face, but his eyes still burning with that unnatural amber light. Behind him, 2 more Lumini entered, their hands glowing with contained power. "Enough games, girl," he said. "Your wolf is strong, but he cannot stand against us. Already half his army lies wounded or dead. The courtyard runs red with blood. If you come now, I will call off the attack. If you refuse, I will kill every living creature in this palace, starting with the child." "No." Soraya stepped forward, placing herself between the mage and Theric. Her whole body was shaking, but her voice was steady. "You will not touch him." "Then come," the mage said, extending his hand. "It is over. Accept your fate." Soraya looked back at Theric, at his tear-stained face, at the trust in his eyes even now. She thought of Iskander, out there fighting, bleeding, maybe dying for her, and she made her choice. She reached for the power inside her, that light that had saved Theric, and she pulled. Hard. Harder than she ever had before. She did not try to control it, did not try to shape it. She simply let it come, let it surge through her like a tidal wave, like a star exploding into being. It erupted out of her like a supernova, silver and white and blinding, filling the room, the palace, the entire world. She felt it burning through her, burning away everything that was small and afraid, leaving only pure, distilled light. Her red dress billowed around her, as if in a wind that came from everywhere and nowhere. Her white hair lifted, glowing like captured moonlight, and her eyes blazed silver, radiant and terrible. The mage screamed, thrown back against the wall with bone-breaking force. The 2 Lumine behind him crumpled, their magic shattered by the sheer force of what Soraya had unleashed. All across the palace, all across the battlefield, the attacking mages collapsed, clutching their heads, their power turned against them. Soraya walked forward, and where her bare feet touched the ground, flowers bloomed from the stone, impossible and beautiful. Her power radiated from her in waves, and she could feel it reaching out, touching the wounded, healing them, knitting flesh and bone, driving out pain and death. "You want to know what I am?" she said, and her voice echoed with power, with centuries of accumulated knowledge flooding into her consciousness. "I am Lumini, but I am also Pack. I am also loved. I am also choosing my own path, and I will not let you hurt my family." She reached out, placed her glowing hand on the mage's chest, and poured light into him. Not to heal, to cleanse, to burn away the darkness and cruelty and twisted ambition until only the truth remained. She saw his life, his choices, the moment he had turned from healer to tyrant, and she unmade those choices, rewrote him at his core. When she pulled back, the mage crumpled to the ground, unconscious but alive, and when he woke, he would be different. Better. Or he would be broken. She did not particularly care which. Soraya turned, her power still blazing around her like wings of light, and walked from the room. She moved through the palace, and everywhere she passed, the wounded were healed, the fires extinguished, the damage undone. The stone walls repaired themselves, the shattered windows reformed. She walked out onto the battlefield, and the carnage that met her eyes nearly drove her to her knees. Bodies everywhere, wolf and human, friend and enemy. The earth was churned to mud, mixed with blood. The air stank of death and magic. But she did not stop. She walked among the fallen, and where her light touched them, they stirred, breathed, lived. The Lumini who were not too far gone fled before her, their courage broken by the sight of what they had tried to claim. now fully awakened and absolutely beyond their control. And then she saw him. Iskander stood in the center of the carnage, covered in blood, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He was wounded, deep gashes across his torso, one arm hanging at an odd angle. But he was alive. He was standing. When he saw her, glowing like a star made flesh, his expression shifted from shock to awe to something like worship. "Soraya," he breathed. She walked to him, her light fading now, her energy draining, but she made it to his side before her legs gave out. He caught her with his good arm, lowering them both to the ground, cradling her against his chest. "I thought I lost you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When you disappeared into the palace, when I felt that power, I thought the worst. I thought they had taken you, hurt you, and I was fighting like a madman to reach you." "I am here," she said, reaching up to touch his bearded face, heedless of the blood. "I am here, and you are alive, and that is all that matters." Around them, the warriors were stirring, checking the wounded, securing the area. The threat was over. The Lumini were defeated, dead or fled or transformed. They had won. But at what cost? "You are incredible," Iskander said, staring down at her with something like reverence. "You are powerful and brave and terrifying, and gods, I love you so much it hurts." "I love you too," she said, and smiled despite her exhaustion. "Now take me home. Take me to our son." He lifted her in his arms, and she felt his pain through the movement, but he did not falter. He carried her back through the gates, through the palace, up to their chambers. Theric was there, having been brought up by his nursemaid, and when the boy saw them, he burst into tears and ran to them. Iskander set Soraya on the bed, then gathered his son close, and the three of them held each other, alive, together, whole. "Is it over?" Theric asked in a small voice. "Yes," Iskander said. "It is over. We are safe now. Your brave Soraya saved us all." "I knew she would," Theric said, looking at Soraya with absolute faith. "She's magic." "Yes," Iskander agreed, his eyes never leaving Soraya's face. "Yes, she is." The days that followed were a blur of healing and rebuilding. Soraya's power had saved most of the wounded, but there were still losses to mourn, funerals to conduct, families to comfort. Iskander worked tirelessly, his arm in a sling, to rebuild what had been damaged and to strengthen their defenses against future threats. The remaining Lumini sent emissaries, not to demand Soraya's return, but to apologize. The order, they said, had been corrupted by the mage Soraya had transformed. His name had been Aldrich, and he had seized control decades ago, twisting the Lumini from healers into collectors of power. With his defeat, the order was reforming, returning to its true purpose. They offered Soraya training if she wanted it, knowledge of her heritage, her abilities. But they made it clear, the choice was hers. They would not force her. Soraya declined. She had everything she needed here. The wedding took place 3 months later, in the spring when the world was blooming and the air smelled of hope. The entire kingdom gathered, filling the palace grounds, spilling out into the surrounding lands. Representatives from allied pacts came, and even some of the reformed Lumini attended, bearing gifts of light and blessing. When Soraya walked down the aisle in a gown of deep crimson silk that pooled around her like blood and fire, her white hair crowned with flowers of silver and gold, Iskander's breath caught in his throat. His arm had healed, his wounds now scars that told stories of love and sacrifice. She was beautiful. She was powerful. She was his. They spoke their vows before the pack, before the gods, before the world. Iskander's voice was strong and clear as he pledged his heart and life and soul to her. Soraya's voice trembled with emotion as she pledged hers in return. "You are mine," he whispered against her lips as they sealed the bond. "And I am yours, now and always. Now and always, she agreed. And when they kissed, the pack howled their approval, and Theric, standing beside them in his finest clothes, beamed with pure joy. He had a mother now, truly. A family, complete. They had become a family, not by blood alone, but by choice, by love, by the fierce determination to protect and cherish each other against all odds. In the years that followed, Soraya learned to control her power fully, to use it not for destruction, but for healing, for growing, for bringing light to dark places. She became a queen beloved by her people, respected by allies, feared by enemies who would threaten her kingdom. Iskander ruled with strength tempered by compassion, with Soraya always at his side, balancing him, challenging him, loving him with a fierceness that never dimmed. Together, they were unstoppable, alpha and mate, king and queen, partners in all things, and Theric grew into a strong, kind young man who loved his father and the woman he called mother with all his heart. He trained to be a warrior, but Soraya also taught him to be a healer. He learned to be fierce and gentle, strong and compassionate, a perfect blend of both his parents. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Soraya would stand at the window of their chambers and look out at the kingdom, at the life she had built from the ashes of loneliness and servitude, and she would marvel at how far she had come, from invisible servant to powerful queen, from powerless to luminous, from alone to beloved, from surviving to truly living. Iskander would come up behind her, wrap his arms around her waist, rest his chin on top of her head. Even after years together, the touch still made her heart race, still filled her with warmth and belonging. "What are you thinking?" he would ask, as he always did. "That I am grateful," she would answer, as she always did. "For all of it. The pain and the joy, the fear and the love, the battles and the peace. Because it led me to you. And me to you," he would say, turning her in his arms to look into her eyes. "My light, my heart, my home, my everything." And he would kiss her, slow and deep and full of promise, and she would melt into him as she always did, as she always would. Outside, the kingdom thrived under their rule. Children played in streets that were safe. Fields yielded abundant harvests. The pack was strong, united, protected. And in the palace, in the royal chambers, a king and queen loved each other with a devotion that had become legend, because they had found each other against all odds, because two broken souls had dared to heal, because love, true love, the kind that demanded sacrifice and gave everything in return, was the most powerful magic of all. And standing there, wrapped in each other, they would watch the sun set over the kingdom they had built together, knowing that whatever challenges came, whatever darkness threatened, they would face it side by side, heart to heart, now and always. This was their story. This was their triumph. This was their forever. And it was beautiful. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.